They found the king's body swollen, rotting, and still dressed in gold, in the dead of winter, inside a palace that smelled of death and incense. Servants whispered of a monarch too proud to die quietly. His bed was soaked in blood and sweat. His courtiers vanished. And outside the frost-glazed windows, his heir was already praying for forgiveness. This was no ordinary death. It was a slow unraveling of power, where God, disease, and guilt all came to collect. So why did no one try to save him? And what secret did they bury with the crown? A salted wind combs the bones of Gardar Cathedral, as if searching for voices long since silenced. The roof is gone, the altar stripped, the pews buried in snow that no longer melts. But something lingers, not warmth, not sanctuary, but memory, cold and brittle as ash. Morning does not rise here. It creeps, hesitant and grey, smearing the ice-crusted sky with a faint bruise of light. It slants through shattered glass, through lancet arches and broken buttresses, to settle like a benediction on the cracked baptismal font. Where once water sang the names of the newborn, now it holds only ice, thick, silent, absolute, somewhere. Beneath the snow, beneath centuries of frost and silence, the voices still echo, the Latin chant of priests, the murmurs of confession, the sigh of women lighting tallow candles for sons who drowned in the fjord. They echo not in sound, but in the way the wind bends as it moves through the nave, in how the light dies before reaching the corners. Down the slope, beyond the ruins, SDS bends before the granary door. Her hands tremble, not from fear, but from cold so deep it has entered the bones of her father's cloak, a patchwork shroud of old sailcloth, mended with gut-string and hope. The brass key, once bright with purpose, now leaks rust onto her palm, staining the wool red like dried blood. She breathes onto the lock. It does not budge. She turns it anyway. Metal grinds, then breaks. Inside there is nothing. No barley, no rye, no dried seal meat, no sour cheese wrapped in birch bark, just silence and gnawed wood, where even mice have abandoned their hunt. She leans against the wall. The boards creak not with weight, but with resignation. She is 13. Her stomach growls in long, echoing waves, but she has learned not to flinch. Hunger is not a visitor anymore. It is a sibling, a companion, a hymn. Her mother waits just beyond the threshold, lips moving in silent prayer, fingers weaving signs into the air. Not the cross alone, but something older. The wards her own mother once stitched into fishing nets and wedding cloaks, protection for souls in between. For those who belong to neither the new God nor the old SDS steps out, leaving footprints. No snow bothers to preserve. The sea is frozen, not with a glass sheen, but in jagged sheets of iron that groan as the tide beneath still moves, trying, failing to remember how to reach the shore. On the ice lies a cod, stiff and glistening, offered like some forgotten votive. A raven perches beside it, one black eye studying the girl, as if waiting for her to beg. She does not. Instead, she lifts the key to her lips, presses it there until it burns, until her breath ices around its rusted teeth. In that moment, the metal tastes like the sea, like shipwreck and old prayers, like the memory of bread. She does not cry. There is no room for that now. Her tears would freeze before falling. Then she opens her hand, and the key, the last key, drops into a fissure in the ice, vanishes, not with a splash, but with the soft finality of a door closing forever. A burial not of a thing, but of a chance. Above her, the sky is torn open with green. Aurora veils rise and fall like the robes of vanished saints, undulating across the heavens in silence too vast to measure. This is not spectacle, this is witness. The sky watches, the stars remember, and from behind, across the fjord, the phantom bell tolls. No rope swings it, no hand dares pull it, but still it rings in the wind, in the stone, in the marrow of the dead trees that mark the edges of the last homestead. It rings for no mass, no feast, no salvation. It rings because the earth has a memory, and the silence cannot hold its breath forever. SDS turns from the shore, her boots creaking in the snow that hardens with each breath. She does not speak, she does not look back. The hunger walks beside her like a shadow with a face, and in the distance, somewhere past the hills where sheep once grazed and children once shouted beneath the midnight sun, smoke curls from a collapsed chimney, thin, pale, and barely holding a sign or a warning. The next chapter waits there, where the last fire struggles for breath. The girl walks toward it, unaware that in the days to come, the wind will begin to carry not just snow and echoes, but voices, desperate, soft, human, and that in the ruin of this frozen church, someone else will soon return, searching for something that was never food, never warmth, but still necessary for survival, faith, or the shape of it, even if only made of frost. A pale cry drifts from the gutted cathedral and crosses the frozen fjord, riding moonlight like a lost psalm. By the time it reaches the lawman's hall, the sound is only a tremor in the rafters, a fleeting shiver that startles the ravens perched upon the roof. Sigga, awake before the coals can remember heat, hears the hush and answers not with words but with silence of equal weight. His palm drags across the serpent knots carved long ago, tracings of authority that once bound the colony to kings and ocean away. Under his rough skin the wood feels brittle, cracking in hidden seams, as if the law itself were splintering. Moonlight, skinned thin and sharp as fishbone, spills through the smoke hatch and touches what little remains of the hearth to glowing teeth, a cough of ember, a single curl of ash. Sigga bends, sets a splinter of driftwood atop the embers, and waits. It does not catch. Outside, ice groans, flexing its ancient spine beneath a bruised aurora that pulses violet green, then a sickly white like old bone. The fjord settles again, and the silence returns, thicker than seal fat. His breath ghosts upward, dissolving among rafters blackened by the withering fire. Breath once filled this hall with Bartawarus ivory laid on the table like moonlit stone, bales of wool soft as newborn lambs. Madeira wine uncorked so swiftly its perfume seemed to hurry summer back into the room. Now each exhalation curls, hesitates, and vanishes, as if commerce itself has taken flight. Leaf sits at the table, shoulders hunched, honing a scythe that will never know barley. Metal scrapes stone, a small, steady rhythm at war with stillness. The blade, dull and specked with rust, thirsts for seal hide that refuses the nets. His eyes flick to the empty cradle in the corner. Yesterday they buried the child beneath stones too light to stay the winter wind. By spring the markers will scatter, and memory will have no address. He has not wept. Something colder than grief has taken that privilege. Sigga crosses the hall and lifts the bronze clapper from the shelf-severed tongue of a bell now choked in rhyme. It is heavy, and he hears, or imagines, a memory of its ring brushing his ear when he tilts it. He places it on the plank table next to the candle, small flame bowing in a draught, and calls for the thing. 6 men arrive, cloaked in hoarfrost that clings like remorse. Their boots bleed snow onto the reed-strewn floor. Their fingers hide in sleeves, ashamed of their trembling. Once they would have gathered on a sunlit slope beside bright sails billowing in the harbour. Law proclaimed beneath banners stitched by Danish wives. Tonight they cluster around one shrinking flame, and that wick bends genuflecting, conceding before scarcity itself. The debate is whispered, yet the rafters hear every word. Leave, they say, for the sea is closing behind us, turning routes to Norway into iron labyrinths. Stay, they insist, for the ocean beyond the ice may be myth, and the oarstroke of hope a danger deeper than hunger. They speak of scralling raids, though none here have seen an arrow in years. Fear is an inheritance, like a broken plough passed from father to son. They tally goats left, fish stores spoiled by brine, hides frayed thin as parchment. A single, scrawny sheep still coughs behind the hall, its fleece matted with frost. It bleats once, and every man flinches as if the animal had pronounced doom. Sigurd listens until their voices crack like thawing ice. Then he raises the clapper. Bronze gleams dully in the candlelight, greened by years of neglect, yet still. It bears the form of a roaring beast and echo of authority. For a breath, the room holds its posture of judgment, but the candle gives a final flutter and dies, and darkness rushes in, knotting the 7 men together in one long, collective exhale. No one moves to relight the wick. The choice has already been made in the silence that follows. Sigurd slips the clapper into the folds of his cloak. Metal clicks against a wooden charm of Thor's hammer-pagan talisman tucked beside Christian relic. Both powerless in this realm of permanent dusk. He steps outside first. Snow crunches under his boots. Each footfall tiny against the glacier's slow breath rolling down the valley. Auroral ribbons writhe overhead like grieving spirits denied burial. The others emerge behind him, but he cannot hear them. The world has softened every edge into hush. He thinks of law, of oaths carved in runes no child bothers to learn, of churches whose bells no longer speak. If judgment is merely silence made visible, then perhaps mercy is the faint shimmer pooling on the horizon. Hinting at dawn that may never arrive yet is imagined all the same. Sigurd walks toward the shore. Wind needles his cheeks, carrying the taste of distant brine through the bitter cold. Somewhere across the ice lies Gardar's broken cathedral. He wonders if the bell's throat remains open to sky, or if snow has sealed it shut, excusing the heavens from listening. His hand tightens around the clapper hidden in his cloak. One tongue, one breath, he thinks, might still summon order, might still gather the scattered and bruised into a thing called community, even if the sound reaches only ravens and ghosts. Behind him, Leaf follows, scythe slung across a shoulder, blade glinting faintly, as if it has found its first star of the night. There is no destination, only the line where ice meets darkness, and beyond that, rumor. Yet each step marks a decision. To move is to believe the world still has room for motion. Far out on the fjord, a crack fractures the silence, echoing like distant thunder. The men halt, hearts thudding. It is only ice shifting its enormous weight, but in that sound they hear ships splinter, faith warp, futures cleave apart. Then all is still once more, save the slow whirl of snow twisting upward like pale smoke. Sig turns his face to the sky. If law fails, he thinks, let memory stand witness. The aurora brightens, casting green fire over features lined by frost. For one instant it resembles stained glass in a church that never existed here. Panes of shifting color painting their worn faces with something almost holy. He presses forward. The others match his stride. Their silhouettes move like dark oaths, scratched onto the white expanse, fragile yet firm. Somewhere ahead, a girl named SDS is walking inland. Haunted by a hunger older than memory, her path and theirs, destined to cross beneath a roofless heaven. Somewhere beyond, a final fire gutters in a shepherd's hut, waiting for hands that still recall how to coax flame from ember. The fjord's groan fades behind them. In its wake, the night exhales, and the first flakes of a new storm drift down soft, slow and inevitable, veiling their footprints before the next chapter can begin. A single cry splits the pewter sky sharp, startled, gone. Geese, ragged as old banners, carve their path toward some distant warmth no map here recalls. Their wings glisten where daylight slips through clouds, and for a breath the world seems to remember motion. Then silence settles, heavy as chain. Male, upon the white cliffs that once welcomed summer pasture. Wind drags salt through the grassless ridges, and the timber crucifix atop Valsey Church bows to every gust. Its splintered arms spread in a posture of exhausted blessing. Beneath that leaning cross, gravestones tilt like broken oars trapped in iron earth, their runes scoured half blank by lichen and secrecy. Among them wanders a lone storyteller, one who has followed the lawman's fading footprints, hoping the echo of human voices might cling to stone. His breath ghosts through the graveyard, recalling a midsummer wedding long extinguished, when song and seal oil torches lit the night, and laughter rose skyward like cathedral bells preparing to freeze. Across a narrow field of crusted snow, a turf cottage squats beneath a hide roof frilled with icicles. Inside Ara grinds angelica root with a walrus ivory pestle, each stroke soft but relentless, as though she might pound life back into the herb's withered veins. Smoke from a peat hearth coils low, unable to rise. The air is too crowded, with the sour tank of spoiled fish and the copper hint of old blood. Her little brother coughs sharp, metallic, a blade striking a shield, then gasps, lungs rattling like loose shutters in a forgotten hall. No bishop has named this sickness. No saga has warned of it. Perhaps scurvy blooms in his blood like winter fungus. Perhaps despair has found a body small enough to claim. She pauses to press the back of her hand against his fevered brow, murmuring an old rhyme their mother sang while kneading bread they will never taste again. Dried thyme sprinkles from her sleeve onto the clay lamp, and for a moment its fragrance strives to outwit decay. But the loft above groans. Stores of cod hang grey and useless, their rancid oil dripping like tar upon the rafters. Outside, the fjord once highway, once giver of gifts from distant kings lies, sealed weeks sooner than law allows, a hammered shield no sunbeam can pierce. Ice shifts beneath its own weight and emits a bass note that travels through the cottage. Walls, through bone, through certainty. Letters from Norway have ceased to cross that barricade. Edicts grow cold in the mouths of those who once carried them. Indulgences, once purchased with coins and contrition, are now paid in seal hides, curling stiff in empty goat pens. The missile by the hearth lies open, pages rhymed in frost, Latin, syllables frozen mid-hallelujah. Ara thumbs a verse, hears it crack like thin ice, and wonders if scripture can bruise. She lifts her brother from the pallet and swaddles him in a cloak woven for a bride on that long-ago wedding night. Gold thread glimmers faintly where moonlight sneaks through a smoke, whole vows unraveling into cold air. Beyond the threshold, Snow absorbs every sound, turning footfalls to whispers. Aro steps into the courtyard where dancers once pounded rhythm into summer earth, where fiddles sang and ale splashed bright against woolen sleeves. Now wooden benches lie upturned, half buried, their carvings of mermaids and lions erode under sheets of sleet. She stands amid those ghosts, feeling her brother's weight, a fragile lantern against her chest. The sky crouches low, each cloud bruised purple, as though hoarding the world's last twilight. She crosses to the churchyard fence. Weathered posts lashed together with strips of seal gut long desiccated to dust. Fingers numb, she unlatches the gate and steps among the stones. Frost feathers across marble epitaphs, silencing names carved by hands that believed stone outlasts breath. She sets her brother beside the largest slab, a rune-etched pillar, half toppled, and with gloved hands brushes snow from the inscription so the boy may read it when spring returns. Spring returns. He watches her silently, eyes glossy yet burning with a fever glow that mirrors the auroral fire now stirring beyond the clouds. She kneels at the base of the leaning crucifix, palm resting against timber chilled to the marrow beneath her touch. The wood feels less like faith, more like bone-hollowed, brittle, perilously human. She remembers the bride who danced beneath this cross, veil swirling with midsummer petals. She remembers the groom lifting a horn of mead toward a sky still golden at midnight. That night, a priest proclaimed joy as something unassailable. Tonight, Ara can barely recall the taste of honey. The wind changes, carrying with it a murmured deep voices, distant but drawing nearer. She lifts her head. Across the frozen slope, silhouettes materialize. 7 figures, cloaks blown wide, trudging toward the fjord's rim. At their lead walks an aging man clutching something heavy against his chest, perhaps a relic, perhaps merely memory dressed in bronze. Their footsteps echo the lawman's purpose, yet there is no triumph in their march. Only the grim rhythm of choices made when none remain. Ara watches, heart thrumming like a snare drum tempered by dread. If they seek sanctuary, she has none. If they seek judgment, the bell that once proclaimed verdicts lies mute beneath drifted snow. Snow begins in earnest flakes, soft as shed feathers, drifting sideways, erasing all distance. Within moments, the strangers blur to smudges, then two. Rumor R.A. feels the hush deepen, a blanket tucked over the last embers of sound. Even her brother's cough quiets, as though the storm itself administers an opiate. She gathers him close and rises. Beneath her boots, the first layer of powder compresses with a sigh, already hiding the prints of her arrival. She knows that, by dawn, even this churchyard will forget she entered. She turns toward the cottage, yet pauses. Above, a single snow, petrel wheels across the dimming sky-white wings, stitching darkness to earth. It cries once, a threadbare note, and the silence swallows the rest. R.A. studies that fragile arc and hears, deep within, a promise. Memory can outfly ruin. She clasps her brother tighter, whispering, "We will write our names in what remains." The boy's eyes flutter, seeking meaning, finding only the warmth of her voice. Behind them, gravestones vanish under settling snow, and the crucifix surrenders another inch to the relentless wind. Candlelight flickers through the sagging shutters of their cottage faint, stubborn, a pulse refusing extinction. Somewhere beyond the ridge, the lawman's company meets the hush of the fjord, bargaining with ghosts. Somewhere farther still, a shepherd threads sinew through cracked boots, watching clouds gather leaden armies over her dwindling flock. The storm that will bind all their fates swells. Unseen Aro steps forward, footprints filling even as they form, and the world receives her silence like a confession. The petrol wheels once more, then vanishes into the thickening snow, carrying an unspoken question toward the next, awaiting flame. A sour wind prowls the half-light, slipping beneath the turf roofs and into the cheese cellar where Eastern settlement once hoarded its pride. Here the wheels of Skye have burst their rinds, ivory curd bleeding onto black stone, an acrid lament that curls in the nostrils like smoke from a damp pyre. Flies-dazed survivors of some forgotten summer hurled themselves against the cellar window, wings thrumming in manic prayer for a warmth they will never regain. Above, on the longhouse gable, a woolen storm flag hangs slack and colourless strands, unravelling into wind-chewed threads. It was dyed crimson in the days of trade, pitched high so passing ships might salute a colony alive with promise. Now it barely remembers motion. Every path once leading east toward Europe has choked beneath glaciers. Every trail to the south has drowned beneath the sea. Only the north remains, a door opening into deeper cold dot. Kerry the shepherd crouches by. The hearth, reindeer hide boots in her lap, sinew between her teeth. She works the needle through cracked leather, counting each pull like a rosary made of absence. 1 for the lambs that burst into the world under midnight sun. 2 for the lover who left to hunt narwhal and never returned. 3 for the sound of butter sizzling on oatcakes by a sun-warm wall. Her stitches tighten, but the memories refuse to close. Outside, 9 sheep once, 60 pluck limp seaweed from the tide line, their fleece mottled green as if they, too, wear the colours of morning. When a distant rumble shakes snow from the eaves, the flock startles, pressing together like pale stones against an unyielding shore. A loom leans in the corner, warp strings snapped. It once fed royal tithe, bales of wool sailing to Trondheim, in exchange for iron blades and amber beads. Now dust clings to the shuttle, cobwebs knot the heddles like ancestral curses. Caris' uncle hovers near the doorway, eyes narrowed over a barrel crusted in ice. He traces branching patterns on its surface, fractals that bloom and fade with each breath of colder air. Even storms grow weary, he mutters, yet the clouds amassing over the fjord resemble leaden armies mustering without drum or trumpet, their silence more menacing than thunder itself. Light dims. Kerry pours rancid whale oil into a clay lamp, and a sickly green flame sputters to life, painting her doubled shadow across the doorway like a warning sent from some harsher future. The odour of tainted fat creeps through the room, mingling with the cellar's sharp decay until every inhalation tastes of survival's cost. She knots the limp storm flag around her shoulders. Faded cloak of impossible Legion sand steps outside. Sleet needles her cheeks. The wind keens through abandoned lanes, dragging with it the faint clamour of nails rattling in loose boards, the brittle percussion of a settlement hollowing from within. Kerry tilts her head, listening for the cathedral bell in Gardar, for the hum of Latin psalms that once braided Christian hope with the older prayers murmured to land. Spirits lingering beneath the peat. Nothing answers but wind, combing emptiness for a voice it might claim. She walks past the cheese cellar, past sled tracks filled with blowing grit, until she reaches a rise overlooking the fjord. Ice lies unbroken, a vast mirror hammered from moonlight, yet beneath its crust she senses movement. The tide still struggles, a trapped beast turning against its bindings. Kerry closes her eyes and summons the memory of spring water coursing over stones, a lullaby her grandmother sang when Storms rattled the shutters, and the world seemed undecided about dawn. She hums that hush, now low, steady, defiant. The melody wavers in the gale, but refuses extinction. Behind her, her uncle's voice rises. Storm, fire, he warns, pointing toward the western sky where clouds roil in molten seams of violet and bruise. Folk tales claim such coloration marks the hour when saints turn their faces away, leaving mortals to reckon with a colder covenant. Kerry inhales the metallic temps of snow yet to fall. Her tongue tastes iron, prophecies bitter gift. She returns to the byre, gathers her 9 sheep, and herds them into a turf pen lined with sea gravel. Their trembling bodies press against her legs. Their clouded eyes reveal no reflection of the woman they still trust. She threads a brittle rope through the gatepost, fingers numbed and clumsy, then lingers a moment, palm resting on a used damp muzzle. Beneath the matted wool she feels a pulse thin, resolute, unwilling to concede. In that subtle throb, she hears the faint echo of a world where warmth was plentiful and death took smaller bites. Night slides down the sky like black oil, the green flame in her lamp gutters, stretching her shadow into the snowdrifts until she appears twice her size, a cloaked titan guarding ruins not worth conquest. She thinks of the thing assembled beyond the ridge, of the lawman Sigurd walking the shoreline with a bell's mute clapper clenched to his chest, of the healer Ara, inhaling time and sorrow beside a boy's rattled lungs. The fates of all 3 threads with hers are, sewing themselves into the same dark tapestry, loom restrung by forces no tithe can appease. The first flakes of the storm arrive broad, wet discs that splatter against her eyelids quickly, succeeded by finer, drier crystals the wind sculpts into ghost shapes along the eaves. Snow muffles the world, erasing hooves and hinges, softening the sharpness of despair until only the steady hush remains. Kerry lifts her face to the swirl, lips parted, and drinks a mouthful of sky that tastes of ice and forever. Then she turns, lamp cradled against her chest, flag cloak snapping like a dying sail, and strides toward the longhouse dot inside. She finds her uncle asleep at the hearth, head lulled against the empty loom. She drapes the flag over his shoulders, tucks the lamp beside him, and stands listening to the storm claim the roof in incremental size. Beyond the shutter, snow thickens, layering silence upon silence. But somewhere deeper in the settlement, a new sound stirs, the faint scrape of quill on calfskin, ink pooling like night. A scribe ran a bends by a dwindling peat fire, inscribing the colony's last annals within the hulk of a long ship, forced to serve as barn dot. Kerry hears the murmur of parchment turning, and in it she hears a promise that not every voice will be unmade. She presses her palm to the doorpost, whispering a final shepherd's blessing over the sheep, the cheese seller, the loom, the storm flag cloak now sheltering her uncle's dreams. Then she blows out the sickly flame, letting darkness seal the room with gentle authority outside. The blizzard unfurls its white banners across heaven and earth, yet somewhere within that opacity, ink still dries to the shape of words. Kerry breathes once, twice, and steps back into the hush, her footprints filling even as they form, bearing her toward the faint glow leaking from a barn ship where stories fight for their last. Breath of light, midsummer arrives without warmth, its name a hollow echo of seasons long betrayed. The sun drags low across the horizon, never rising, never setting, just circling like a weary sentinel too tired to sleep. Chill clings to every timber, to every breath, to the ribs of the Norse. Longship, that once tore through northern waters, its dragon-carved prow slicing through foam and legend. Now it rests on land, half buried in frost-bitten soil, its keel splintering beneath the weight of silence and straw. Chickens roost beneath the hull, feathers dull, eyes half-lidded with hunger. The prow, once the spearhead of ambition, has become a shrine to endurance, its barnacled flanks no longer armored against the sea, but against forgetting. Within the adjacent long hole, the last fire dwindles to coals, their heat barely able to lift the cold from the floor. Smoke curls against the roof beams, clinging to the carved knotwork like the last breath of a dying god. Here, bent over a wobbled table, sits Rana, the colony's scribe, the historian of collapse. She sharpens her final goose quill with hands that tremble not from age, but from starvation and memory. A sliver of iron sparks against bone. The quill yields a final edge. She dips it into ink, thinned with the oil of desiccated cod liver stick. Bitter, dark, as the water that swallows ship sand begins to write. Her Latin is imperfect, her Norse more honest. What she inscribes onto scraps of calfskin is not grandeur, not saga, but truth. Dates paired with winds, names paired with graves. Baptisms recorded beside meltwater gathered from gutters. A child named Horvald, buried in swaddling. A wedding postponed until the barley arrived, and it never did. A harvest feast that boiled sealed blubber and sorrow in equal measure. She does not embellish, she only remembers. That is her vow, to let the record breathe, even if the breath stinks of smoke and despair. The fire cracks, a peat log collapses. Her throat burns from the same smoke she's lived with for years. Peat-dried dung, salt from tears. Still, she dips her quill again and writes of bishops who once debated whether souls so distant from Rome weighed less. In heaven's measure, papal bulls had promised indulgence for those who settled this edge of the world, had promised absolution. But absolution came with no bread, and grace cannot be eaten. The bulls yellowed in the cathedral and were used for kindling last spring. A whisper stirs the hall, not a word, but a presence hope. It arrives like a skittish creature, sniffing the corners, inspecting the rafters, looking for somewhere to land. She dares not name it aloud. Instead, she records the rumor that a lone ship has left Norway, its hull stacked with rye, its mast bearing the banner of a new king. No one remembers the king's name. That part of the message was lost too, wind or weariness. But even rumor is cargo now. Even rumor must be preserved. Dusk folds itself around the settlement. Rana sits straighter, though her back protests. With care, she seals the calfskin scrolls with resin made from boiled spruce pitch. They're fragile things, patchworked vellum, stitched seams, pages. Frayed by ash butt, they carry all that remains. She presses the settlement signet ring into the wax. A ship beneath northern stars. A constellation of a people still pretending they belong to the sea. She rises and walks to the ship barn, stepping over frozen straw and collapsed beams. The chickens scatter, startled by a movement that isn't wind. Rana lifts the scrolls and places them inside the dragon prow, where once the helmsman stood. She lays them beneath a slab of driftwood repurposed as an altar, surrounded by withered flowers, bone beads, a melted candle, and a rusted comb that once belonged to her mother. She says no words as she sets them down, only breathes, as though breath might be prayer enough. Outside the mist thickens. The sky churns with a dim gold where the sun smears itself thin, and then, from the direction of the sea, a sound rises deep. Sonorous, ghost-like. A foghorn. Runner freezes. It is a sound no one has heard in 3 winters. The children born in this land have never known it. It moans through the hills, hugging the fjord's curve like a voice calling from the deep. For a moment, her heart forgets its rhythm. She rushes to the threshold, hand shielding her eyes against the swirling gloom. No sail, no hull, only fogger curtain drawn across the world's edge. The horn sounds again, longer this time, then cuts out like a lie, a trick of wind, a judgment, a farewell. The silence afterward is cavernous. She remains still for a time, letting the sound echo through her marrow, then turns back into the hall. The fire has collapsed into red glass. Only the coals give light now, casting her ink-stained fingers in amber. They glow faintly, as if the words themselves had seeped into her skin, branding her a keeper of vanishing things. She kneels before the hearth and prays, not in Latin, not in perfect Old Norse, but in a silence so deep it gathers the voices of both languages and binds them like reeds into one breath. Her hands tremble as she folds them. The quill lies spent. The ink has run dry. She does not need more dot outside. Sleet taps the hull of the dragon ship, gentle at first, then more insistent. The chickens settle again, unbothered. The world grows colder, and somewhere in the east, a woman named Carey walks toward the barn with the lullaby of her grandmother still on her lips and the storm flag cloak wrapped tight around her shoulders. Rana looks up, eyes catching the faintest pulse of light through the warped shutters. Not a star, not a ship, but perhaps something still watching. She smiles once small, quiet, unfinished. Then she adds a final line to the parchment with her finger in ash. We remained, we remembered, even here. And the fire dies gently, like a bow lowering in reverence. To the night, snow arrives like a verdict. It rattles across iron cauldrons left beneath the eaves for meltwater, hissing into steam that vanishes before it can comfort a tongue. The same storm that smothered the longship barn now shoulders its way up the fjord, laying claim to Brattahlid, the storied hall of Eric the Red. Inside, the great hearth is a black mouth stuffed with damp driftwood. A boy named Hakon crouches before it, striking flint against iron until his knuckles bleed, each spark a doomed messenger that dies before tasting wood. In sagas, these chambers once roared with fire and feasting. Tonight they answer only with echoes and the slow drip of melted frost. His mother, Ingrid, watches from the high seat, the wolf pelt of better winters draped across shoulders gone narrow with hunger. Around her throat hangs a strand of glass beads, violet, cobalt, amber traded decades ago for Bylene. She fingers them like a rosary, bead to bead, memory to memory. Towers of cheese gleaming on oak boards, ox horns brimming with ale that frothed until dawn, warriors thumping tables in triumph over the sea. Now the platters beneath those tapestries hold nothing but wind. The woven scenes of Vinland grapes and victorious hunts sag with mildew, turning banner-bright dreams into pulp. Outside, the goat pen is silent, save for one blind nanny whose bleat scrapes the air like cracked ice. Hakon sits back on his heels, breath puffing white. Again Ingrid murmurs. He obeys, though flint and iron sound more brittle with each strike, as if the tools themselves resent the labour. Sparks flare pitiful, brilliant, doomed and extinguish against the glistening logs. Smoke without flame snakes up, carrying the reek of rot where fungus has gnawed the heartwood. The boy's stomach clenches hard enough to echo. Hunger is a drum the body cannot silence. Ingrid uncorks a clay flask and pours the last trickle of buttermilk into a wooden cup. It is thin, bluish, nearly water, but she holds it out like an offering from a generous god. He hesitates, his lips part, then close. He knows the cup costs her more than a fasting day. It costs a certainty that a mother's body will survive. The winter, she nods once, tiny, regal. He drinks, the liquid coats his throat with memory. Grass sweet, cows lowing, sunlight warm enough to open a heart. When he lowers the cup, he wipes his mouth on a sleeve gone shiny with wear, and returns to the futile choreography of spark and smoke. Beyond the shuttered slits of the hall, sea ice locks the fjord like iron bars. Every route to Norway, to Iceland, to hope, lies sealed beneath slabs that groan with tides no moon can guide. The magnetic pole wanders, confusing compasses, while rumors of plague ride north on ships that never arrive. Priests bless empty coffers. Hunters return with nets shredded by unseen jaws beneath the glacier, and each new dawn resembles dusk wearing another mask. Yet auroras still unfurl above the ruined green curtains billowing in stellar wind, opening. On a stage where no actors remain, night tightens early. Hakon gives up on Flint and reaches for his one treasure, a toy boat whittled by a father lost to a sealing voyage. Its hull bears nicks from play, its tiny mast leans, yet the carved dragon head still snarls with absurd defiance. The boy sets the boat afloat in a puddle of meltwater on the hearthstone. It spins, rudderless, like a compass desperate for a star. Ingrid watches, glass beads catching the weak lamplight and shivering with it, as if the necklace itself mourns. All journeys left undone. She rises, bones protesting, and drapes the wolf pelt around Hakon's shoulders. The fur is stiff with age, musk mingling with the iron scent of snow that blows through every unseen crack. "Hold the warmth," she whispers. The doors of the manor creak in the gale, sounding less like portals and more like warning gates. To a realm the living seldom enter willingly. Wind slithers across the threshold, carrying from the courtyard the hoarse bleat of the blind gotelo note of life, fragile as reed music over frozen water. Then, at last, a spark lands true. It nestles against a vein of resin in the driftwood and flares, not bright, but earnest. A hesitant flame licks outward, tasting the log. Hakon shelters it with cupped hands, breath held, eyes wide as if an ancestor had stepped into the room. Ingrid kneels opposite him, and together they coax the newborn fire with shreds of dried sedge, with crumbs of hope. The flames catch the tapestry's faded reds, reviving for a moment the grapes, the hunt, the long-ago horns of mead, but the glory flickers. Mildew drinks light quickly, and smoke thickens, grey as disillusion. A curl of flame gutters, gasps, and dies, leaving a single thread of smoke rising like a question too shy for words. It sways, unsure of direction, then drifts upward through the smoke hole and into the iron night. Hakon presses the toy boat to his chest. Ingrid closes her eyes. In the hush, they can almost believe the smoke might find the open sky, might brush against an unseen sail, might whisper of a hearth that still roars somewhere beyond the ice. Outside, the first snow of autumn falls harder, laying white cloth over the blind goat, over the abandoned forge, over the path where torches once escorted guests to midsummer revels. Each flake lands without sound, but together they compose a hush so deep it feels like the earth is holding its breath. Beyond this hush, somewhere between the glow of the dying embers and the unreachable shimmer of aurora, a lawman still walks the frozen shoreline, A healer hums beneath a leaning crucifix. A shepherd steadies her 9 sheep against the wind. A scroll bearing their stories rests inside a dragon ship, waiting. The spark in the hearth has failed, yet its brief gleam has branded both mother and son with a stubborn warmth. Ingrid pulls Hakon close, wolf fur enveloping them in the scent of untold miles and remembered hunts. In the darkness, she feels the beads at her throat cool against her skin, and she imagines them as tiny planets, each orbiting a world where summer still keeps its promises. She tilts her head, listening to the storm, to the goat, to the silent boat pressed between them, and murmurs, almost to herself, "We are not finished." Her words fade into the timber like seeds pressed into frozen soil, awaiting an impossible spring. Beyond the walls, snow deepens, moonlight glows through its veil, and the toy boat, those still dreams of water it cannot see. In that quiet dream, the next chapter breathes, waiting for the moment when ice at last remembers how to break.